Good morning, Craig. How are you doing?
Morning. Very well, thanks, Fish.
So today we are here to just do a general interview with you, talk a bit about your time at Auckland Grammar, where you went after you left Auckland Grammar, and just about all the aspects of your current life. So we'll start off with, what was your favorite memory from your tenure at Auckland Grammar?
Well, favorite memory, gosh, that's a big question. You know, probably, getting the first bump. They talk about the grammar slide and the grammar ladder, and I started in 3F,
Right.
Foxtrot. And at that time, the classes only went down to J. I don't know if you've still got that
Now
grading.
they're down to Q and R.
Q, right. So I was 3F, and that was just in the scheme of the number of classes at that time, that was slightly below the middle, and figured out with my mum's help actually how to prepare and study. I come from a school where exams weren't common, weren't frequent. I wasn't really used to using that muscle, and did okay in the first year and got bumped up to 4E. And that was the beginning of a progressive movement. Actually, I ended up in 7A3, I think, over time. But that was kind of the first real reinforcement that I could do something if I put my mind to it, and I would be rewarded for the result.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And because you were also a prefect in 1987, what was your highlights in your final year of school?
Well, that was a great memory as well. I probably should have talked about that as well. It was a huge surprise to me, actually. I wasn't in one of the top sporting teams. I was, always played sport. I certainly wasn't a top scholar. And I understand the way it worked at the time was that the masters would sort of come up with a short list, but then there would be two or three wildcard slots that were voted by the student body, and mine was one of those slots. So it was a doubly humbling experience. First of all, I wasn't expecting it, and second, to be I guess voted into that position by my peers was a real honor in many ways, and it was a fantastic group of guys, that prefect group, and I'm still in touch with most of them today.
Oh wow! And after you graduated, you went to university in Auckland, then you moved to London. So following that, how did you get into your career? What was the drive behind that?
Yeah, well, you've rapidly covered about 10 years in one sentence there. So I went from Auckland Grammar into university, didn't think that much about it, honestly. I had a good friend who was also in Auckland Grammar, Old Boy, still a friend today, Michael Collinson, and he had done a tremendous amount of research about what to do at university. In those days, they came out with these sort of thick books full of the options and the courses, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do, and I don't think many people do at that age. But Mike had decided that commerce and law was the right thing to do, and I thought, well, if it's good enough for Mike, I'll do it too. So kind of followed in on his coattails in a way, and ended up doing a conjoint degree, a BCom LLB. And at the time we came out, you kind of either turned right and became an accountant, or turned left and became a lawyer, at least with that degree. And I turned left. I followed the law. I was a barrister and solicitor, so I did mostly court work with a company called Simpson Grierson for about 6 years, and really enjoyed that time, but knew in my heart that I really was more interested in business. And this was at the time that the internet was really becoming a thing. So I wanted to put myself in the middle of that, didn't really know how, So thought I would go back to university, do a master's degree, which is actually what it took us to London in the first place. Did an MBA at London Business School, and that was kind of my pivot point. Entered consulting in the technology sector after that, where I've been, at least in that sector ever since, for now 24 years.
Yeah. And so then, while you were in technology, how did you work your way through to your current position as Chief Operating and Chief Strategies Officer for Google UK?
Well, I had a long period at this company called Accenture, which is a consulting company. They focus really on doing big scale technology implementations inside companies. So it's really a sort of delivery vehicle. And I ran the deal team there, actually. We did a lot of outsourcing deals at the time. So spent 16 years in communications, media, and technology. Actually, Google was a client of Accenture's. Though I didn't work directly with Google, I worked mostly in the telco sector over that period of time. And sort of just felt like the learning curve had flattened out. Machine learning and AI was becoming a real, an interesting thing, a practical thing that was more commonplace. Wanted to put myself in the heart of that, and wrote down, a few other companies that would serve that passion. Google was on that list. I think I had two others on that list. And although Accenture had offered me a big global job, actually, which is a fantastic job. So I had a really nice option in the bank, so to speak, and wasn't particularly, didn't particularly need to move. But I ended up just sort of Googling, actually, who runs Google in Europe. It's a guy called Matt Britton. Matt's still the head of Google in Europe today. And I pinged Matt on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, Matt, it's Craig. This is what I think is going on in the industry. These are the trends, and this is why I feel it's important. I'd love to sit down and have a coffee with you." And genuinely, that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to have a coffee with him. I tried to meet 2 or 3 new people a week, and Matt was on my hit list that week. I did have in the back of my mind that it would be a great place to work. And like many things in life, the luck and the timing were on my side. They were recruiting for a big role at the time, and Matt very charitably put me into the process, and one thing led to another, and here I am.
Oh wow, that's actually quite a lovely story. And talking about your initiative of meeting 2 to 3 people every week, I found that quite fascinating. And also your YouTube career, coffee, eggs, and
inspiration.
And coffee, yes. And your YouTube career, coffee, eggs, and inspiration. It was actually quite fascinating. So what inspired you to start this initiative and follow through with it?
Well, first, meeting new people is something I would encourage anyone to do. You almost always learn something new that you didn't know before. Often you hear remarkable stories from people. And it occurred to me after doing this for some time, I'm sitting in front of this incredible person listening to their story, but I'm an audience of one. So why don't I record these and make them available for others? And even if just one other person watched it, I've doubled the audience.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? And the second objective, really, as a leader in Google, and Google owns YouTube, so YouTube's part of the business. I think it's really, really important that we experience our products as leaders, as a creator would in this case, as a customer would. I'm often standing in front of big audiences, talking, doing a keynote speech about one topic or another. And frequently, YouTube's a subject in that people are really interested in. So I felt it would be really good to experience that myself. I set out on a mission to record, distribute, and edit likely only using a smartphone. So for the first 100 videos that I posted on my YouTube channel, they were filmed, edited, and distributed, uploaded only with a smartphone. And I kind of wanted to do that for a point, to say, like, if you've got a smartphone and an idea, you can become a creator and reach a global audience. I've done it. And this is how, right? So, and it's come a long way. I don't use a smartphone anymore. I have a couple of good cameras, but it's still pretty, and I've expanded the content from sort of interview format to, there's a bit of lifestyle stuff in there, which was largely triggered by COVID. Interviews were a bit more difficult. But it's, it's great fun. And 2 weeks ago, we're filming this in June 2022. 2 weeks ago, I passed the thresholds for monetization. So I'm now a paid influencer on YouTube. That's not how I, what I set out to achieve, but it's a pretty cool milestone, because you need more than 1,000 subscribers and more than 4,000 watch hours in the previous 12 months. I'm not going to be buying anything more than a coffee a month with the proceeds, but it's kind of a cool milestone.
No, that's pretty cool. And so with all these people you interview, how do you shortlist and choose who to interview? Because you must have quite a few options.
Yeah, in some cases, people approach me, either directly or through others. In other cases, I just meet people. Maybe I'm out and and have a business meeting, get talking to somebody and think, wow, that's an incredible story. In other settings, it's a sort of contact of a contact, and they're really just, I think that the big point about YouTube is that the content that you post needs to be authentic. So you need to be genuinely and personally interested in it. And so that's the threshold, right? If I find the story really interesting and the person intriguing, I tend to share it. So the last person I interviewed is a guy called Jack Trigger. He's a professional yachtsman.
Oh, wow.
Based in the UK, in the southeast coast of the UK, and he's about to do the Vendée Globe, which is a round the world race, and it's solo, non-stop, so no landfall.
Wow.
It takes about 75 days. You sleep when you can. There's an autopilot on board, but that's the only piece of real technology. And this guy also happens to be type 1 diabetic. So he's doing all of this. And I just think that's a sensational story. It's interesting for the technology. It's interesting for the sort of human and boat management side of things, for the adventure, for the peril. And one thing he shared with me actually is that there's only 100 people in history who have done this. Now, to put that in context, there's about 700 who have been to space, right? So this is a very rare thing. So that's just an example I use, but there's many others on the channel.
Yeah, and just on a different note, I just wanted to talk about your record label and video production company. So how did you get into this entertainment industry, a completely different sector, and what was the motivation behind that?
It's a social motivation. So both of my companies that I founded, Big Community Records and Big Community Productions, the first one being a record label, the second one being a TV and film production company, or a video production company, arose from an observation, really, which is that talent, and in this case creative talent, is everywhere, but opportunity isn't, right? Opportunity definitely is not evenly distributed. And I started both companies with a view of surfacing and celebrating great talent, creative talent from less privileged backgrounds, whether that's socioeconomic privilege or, in the case of the latest project in the film and television side, accessibility privilege. It's a short film that leads to a series about a deaf girl and her dog, and all of the key positions on the crew, the director, the cinematographer, the composer, are deaf themselves. So that's a type of sort of accessibility privilege, and it's great fun. The record label evolved from working with a couple of young men from London. One was homeless at the time and sleeping on the Victoria Line, which is a tube tube line. It's the only heated tube that goes through the night, so that was his home effectively. And the other one grew up in a very poor neighbourhood in South London called Mitcham, and had only ever really dreamed of doing music. For him, it was his therapy. He wrote lyrics because he couldn't afford a therapist and he had a pretty tough life, but he expressed himself through his lyrics. He's a rapper. And to do music, you need time and you need money. And neither is very commonly available if you're from a really poor background, which Quasi was. And he got drawn into the so-called track life. So he got drawn into a gang. He was a Class A drug dealer, not because he woke up one morning thinking, you know what, I'd really love to put my life at risk every day, but because he felt that was the only way of earning enough money and freeing enough time to do what he really loved, which was music. And this is the story of very, very many people. You know, I'm sure the same is the case in the poorer parts of Auckland and other parts of New Zealand. But that lifestyle caught up with him about 5 years ago. His friend was shot in the head and killed, and his cousin, who was only 15 at the time, was stabbed and survived it, but got a hot head, got his own knife and went round and killed the guy and got 18 years in prison. He was convicted when he was 16 years old. And in combination, those two events were the wake-up call that Quasi needed. He said to himself, you know, I'm determined to do music, but this is not my narrative. I'm not going to do it like this. And he bravely decoupled himself from that life. He's a good guy. He's got good values. And that's when we met. He was on this sort of long and hard road. I felt he deserved to start. We started initially working on a Kickstarter campaign, but the thing about Kickstarter is that, you know, it's like GoFundMe. You set a target. If you reach your target, you get the money. If you don't, you get nothing. And I knew that his budget was too small. I knew that he would campaign his heart out and probably end up with nothing at the end of that. So I literally Googled how to start a record label, found this company called Ditto based in Liverpool, who does record label in a box. I said, click, yep, I'll have one of them. And next week I went round and I signed him as my initial artist, and we set out to realize his dream. And we put out an album in the middle of lockdown called Blood on the English Carpet. Check it out. Blood on the English Carpet by Quasi Court. It's 8 tracks. I think it's really cool. It mixes grime, which is a type of rap, and rock. And we did five music videos to boot. But the whole team, including Quasi, came from this background of less privilege. Every role. The team is sort of eight people now, so it's sizable.
And how have you grown since the start of everything?
Yeah, well, so we did that initial album in lockdown, which was tough because you can't back it up with live. The dirty secret in music is that musicians don't make money from the music, unless you're sort of Taylor Swift or Ed Sheeran. You know, unless you're getting billions of views, you really don't make money. So you need to make money on the live, which obviously didn't happen in lockdown, not in the traditional way, and from other things like brand partnerships and sponsorships and things like that. Anyway, since then it's built. So actually 2 weeks ago I had 8 artists through the studios. We're recording an album in partnership with a DJ group called Rampage at the moment. Called Beautiful Pairings, and it puts together 5 pairs, so 10 artists in total, an established artist with an up-and-coming artist, and they're all co-writing and performing a track, and we'll put those together in an album, which we will release prior to Notting Hill Carnival, which is a big street festival here in London. And all of them will perform their tracks live over the course of 3 days on the big static stage at Notting Hill Carnival, which is a really, really big deal. It's the biggest static stage of any street festival anywhere in the world. It gets 2.5 million people past it. So it's bigger than Glastonbury, it's bigger than Lollapalooza, it's bigger than Burning Man, etc. And yeah, hopefully that will give those artists their start. And then the third project, I signed recently a 16-year-old South African girl. She's a singer and songwriter from Johannesburg, and
Yeah.
we're doing a single with her. Her name's Janique, and she's really cool. She's got an amazing voice.
Yeah. And so how do you find artists internationally as well?
Janique, I found on YouTube.
Ah,
You know, I take an interest in music's a huge genre on YouTube, and
yeah.
I was intrigued by some of the stuff that she was doing. Her videography was amazingly creative. The visuals that she was doing, the music was creative, and her voice is sort of cross between. She's sort of like a combination of Jessie J and Adele. So she's got an incredible vocal range. She's a performer, so she can dance as well. And I could see from her social, Instagram, etc., that she was really putting a lot of effort into this. So I DM'd her on Instagram, and we started talking. I said, look, I'd love to help you. And it turned out that her, she was struggling, right? Because her parents, who are wonderful people, had been supporting her, but both of them were in IT, serving mostly airports. And you can probably imagine what happened to that business over COVID, right? All of the airports basically shut. So I think they had to sell their family house. So she was really struggling, and I felt she deserved a chance. So we're doing a single called Rise Again. And hopefully it'll be out in the sort of second half of the year. And it's been produced and co-written by one of the advisors on my record label board, who's a guy called Edan Dover. And he's basically a global rock star. He's from a band called The Score. Check them out, The Score. They're based in Los Angeles, but they're touring Europe at the moment. And he's an incredibly gifted musician, and obviously a very successful. They've got like 1 billion streams on Spotify. So he has co-written and produced this. So watch out for it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think you've learned to network and grow exceptionally well. So where to from here? What's the future looking like?
Well, I think always keep moving. I tend to do things, stick with something as long as it feels uncomfortable, because I think discomfort is a sign that you're learning something, and then tend to move on when that's no longer true. So my day job at Google is wonderful, serving that passion well. I've got a wonderful team. I really enjoy it. And these sort of creative outlets outside Google also give me something completely different, as you said earlier, Vish, to focus on and express that sort of creative muscle. So I guess more of the same thing. I also do quite a lot of angel investing. So that's an individual investing in a startup. So I've got 13 companies that I've invested in, and I think that will probably build over time. So chapter, whatever it is I'm up to now, is likely to be, is likely to evolve into something in the venture capital sector.
Yes. And so following that, do you just, when you're looking for companies to invest in and startups to invest in, do you just keep expanding your portfolio, or do you eventually say goodbye to one and add on another company?
It pays. So the way venture capital works, which is actually very similar to music and very similar to film, is that most businesses that you back will fail. Right, that's the reality. I think it's something like 70%. So you need a portfolio. So to answer your question, to do it properly, you really need to build multiple. I've got 13 at the moment. I think a better number would be 20, because I know most of those businesses will fail, or at least not wildly succeed. And you need, 1 or 2 out of 10 to succeed well with a high multiple, to sort of pay for all of the rest that didn't succeed and give you a good return commensurate with your risk. So yes is the short answer. Continue to expand, and but not do that sort of randomly, right? I think you need to have an investment thesis, a point of view. Typically, you focus on a single sector or an area. So I only invest in technology-based businesses, and within that, in clean technology, sustainable technology, in what I call the attention economy, so advertising and similar sort of businesses, and others who are sort of disrupting in some way, in a material way, their sector. So I've got some fintech businesses. Got a couple of New Zealand businesses as well that I've invested in over the years. Really, like most things in life, the thing that you invest mostly in is not the idea. I mean, the idea needs to be good, but it's the team. It's the people that you invest in. So that's what you look for.
And so with all of these startups, as well as your record label, video production company, and your hobbies, how are you able to manage such a busy lifestyle on top of being COO and CSO for Google UK Ireland?
It's a question I get a lot, and the answer is I make the time. The side hustle stuff I do outside the day job, so I'm very fully focused on Google during the day. We're filming this at 8 a.m. My time, in the evening your time. Thank you.
Yeah.
Which is convenient because it's before my Google day starts, and then at the end of the day, let's see, today at 5:30 p.m. I've got my record label meeting. So it happens after hours and typically over weekends. A lot of people cycle or do yoga or make pottery or do art. I do side hustles, and that's my way of sort of actively relaxing.
Right. And also you have another very interesting hobby, and that is flying planes, flying around Europe. How did you get into that aviation sector?
Well, it took me a long time, actually. I got my pilot's license when I was 46, about 5 years ago. And it's almost 6 years ago now, actually. And it's something I always wanted to do. So I grew up in Auckland, obviously, Auckland Grammar.
Yes.
And my dad was an entrepreneur. He had a toy company that ultimately became, it was called Fenton Toys for a while, and then it ultimately became Mattel in New Zealand. And he used to travel a lot. So I have these sort of childhood memories of driving with my mum to drop dad off at the airport in Manukau, and sort of smelling the avgas in the air. And it always was associated for me as something exotic. Right, and these far off lands that he was going to, wouldn't that be amazing? Wouldn't it be amazing to have the facility to get there? Hence flying, and never really made the time to do that until I was in my mid-40s. And actually, subsequently, my wife, who's also a Kiwi, has got her pilot's license. So we fly together. We have a small plane, 4-seater, single engine. For those aviators out there, it's a Piper Archer 3, 48 years old, the aircraft. It's like a white van of the sky. And we putter around at low speeds, slow and low, as they call it, touring. And it gives you great options. So we can go from London to, let's say, the Isle of Wight, which is kind of like the Waiheke of the South Coast. In 30 minutes, walk down to the beach, get fish and chips, and then come back and be home in time for dinner. But it's a great way of sort of seeing the country. My favorite place to fly is actually Scotland. It's a lot like the South Island of New Zealand. It's very mountainous. The Highlands are anyway, and just incredible scenery, a little bit quieter. And I also have my New Zealand pilot's license. So when I'm back in New Zealand, as I will be finally this December, I fly. My folks live in Kerikeri, so I fly around Northland mostly when I'm there.
Oh, wow. And no, that's really interesting. So do you just fly in the United Kingdom, or do you ever cross over to
Yeah, crossover. So I've flown the aircrafts. It's about 1 hour to reach France, for example.
Right.
So London to Calais, and my little putt machine is an hour. So I've flown it to France. I've flown it to the Netherlands. I've flown it to Germany. Flown it to Scotland, Wales, lots of different places. So it's a great thing. My next objective is to fly to Denmark and up through the Nordics, which is apparently amazing landscape to fly over. And there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of aviation airfields all over Europe, and you can land, right? You have a right to land at any of them, including a big airport. Although it's a bit more expensive to do that. What's that?
So I just lost you there for a second.
Okay, I'm back now.
Oh, okay. Sorry, you were saying.
Yeah, so there's the hundreds and hundreds of small airfields all over Europe, and you have a right to land. Typically, you give them a call beforehand and tell them when you're likely to arrive. And you know, we only need 500 meters of grass, and we can put it out.
Yeah. Well, and no, I think that's actually really cool to just go wherever you want. And the thing is, beautiful thing about Europe is there's just so much to explore in such near proximity. So to last category, advice. So in the 90s, the internet arrived and completely revolutionized the world. And then early 2000s, Orkut and Facebook had their huge influence. And now there's been a huge change and a huge shift in the usage of technology as more people embrace it in the past 2 years with COVID. And a lot of offices are now just have been transferred to online, all of that. So my question is, what advice would you give to students who are looking to choose a career in these changing times?
I think you need to focus more on the why than the what, right? If you think about the what job, what company, etc., it can become quite discombobulating and confusing. And it's really not the thing that's important. The important thing is the why, and that for everyone is different. So I would encourage you to think about your passion. What excites you? Think about what you do as a hobby. Like what do you read over the weekend or do, you know, as a pastime? Think about topics that when you talk about, your eyes light up, you lean forward and you talk a bit faster. You know, these are all indicators that you're passionate about whatever that is. Treat that as your primary lens, and follow that passion wherever it takes you. And filter and evaluate your options, whether they be tertiary education options or vocational professions or you know, starting a business or whatever. It needs to go through that filter first. Does it serve my why? If yes, do it. If not, don't. So that's the main thing. You know, the world will continue to change more rapidly than ever. So having a real solid view of your North Star why is the most important thing.
And I think that perfectly answers my second question, because it was going to be for those with great aspirations, but who are facing difficulty deciding what they want to do in life. So I think, yeah, you've answered 2 in 1 perfectly.
Yeah, we'll give it a go. You know, we're never certain. You know, the big decisions in life are seldom straightforward. What job to take? Should I get married? Should I not get married? Should I have kids? You know, these sorts of, should I move countries? They're never straightforward, and there won't be a concrete answer for that. And there's only one way to find out.
All right. Well, that's all the questions I have for you. Thank you very, very much for doing this interview with us. It's been a pleasure to have you here. Yeah, good luck, really, for any more ideas you come up with and all that you do.
My pleasure, Vish, and good luck to you as well.
All right. Thank you.